Was a long day, I know how you feel. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the world outside start to fade away. Welcome back to the Mental Lullaby. Tonight, we aren't just looking for rest, we're giving your mind the permission it needs to let go. Using gentle psychological techniques and calming soundscapes will guide your nervous systems from the noise of the day into the quiet of the night. You have done enough for today. Now, it's time to simply be. Let's begin our journey into sleep.
The mysterious origin of the Chosen Undead from Dark Souls. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's deep exploration, if you're enjoying these atmospheric journeys through video game lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. Now, let's dim the lights, settle in, and descend into one of Dark Souls' most compelling mysteries. There's something profoundly haunting about waking up in a cell with no memory of how you got there. No recollection of who you were, what you did, or why you've been imprisoned in this crumbling asylum perched somewhere in the frozen northern mountains. The Northern Undead Asylum greets you not with answers, but with silence, decay, and the distant groans of those who've already lost themselves to madness. You are undead, marked by the Darksign, cursed to rise again and again until your will finally breaks and you become another mindless hollow wandering these forsaken halls. But you are also called something else, something that carries weight and expectation. The Chosen Undead. The title itself raises more questions than it answers. Chosen by whom? For what purpose? And perhaps most intriguingly, chosen from among how many others? Throughout your journey across Lordran, from the depths of Blighttown to the gleaming spires of Aner Londo, from the painted world of Ariamis to the abyssal ruins of Awalisile, you'll be told repeatedly about prophecies and destiny, about the fate of the world resting on your shoulders. But the game never quite confirms whether any of it is true, or if you're simply the latest victim of an elaborate manipulation spanning centuries. Today, we're going to examine the mysterious origin of the Chosen Undead, piecing together fragments of lore from item descriptions, environmental storytelling, and cryptic dialogue to understand not just who this character is, but what their existence means within the larger mythology of Dark Souls. We'll trace the bloodline back to the very beginning, to the Furtive Pygmy and the Dark Soul itself. We'll examine the nature of the Undead Curse and why it exists. We'll question the prophecy that Oscar of Astora recites with his dying breath, and we'll explore the competing visions offered by two primordial serpents who each claim to know the truth. The journey begins not in that dank cell, but much earlier, in an age before fire, before life and death as we understand them, in a world of gray crags and arch trees and immortal dragons. The age of ancients and the Lord Souls. In the beginning, there was neither light nor dark, neither life nor death. The world existed in a state of perpetual gray, a timeless limbo where ancient stone arch trees stretched toward ashen skies and immortal dragons ruled over an unchanging landscape. These everlasting dragons knew no hunger, no fear, no desire. They simply existed, eternal and unassailable, their scales harder than stone, their reign unchallenged for eons beyond counting. This was the Age of Ancients, a time of stagnation where nothing ever changed, where the very concept of change held no meaning. The dragons themselves were beings beyond our comprehension. They possessed no souls as we understand them, no driving force or motivation. They were simply part of the landscape, as unchanging and eternal as the stone arch trees they perched upon. Their scales were so incredibly durable that no force in existence could pierce them. They were, in every sense, immortal, existing in perfect stasis with the gray world around them. But beneath this gray veil, in the depths below, something stirred. The first flame appeared, though whether it ignited spontaneously or was born from some unknown catalyst, none can say. What matters is that fire brought with it something entirely new to the static world: disparity. The concept of difference, of opposition, of one thing existing in relation to another rather than simply existing. Where there had been only gray, now there was light and dark. Where there had been only stasis, now there was heat and cold. Where there had been only immortal sameness, now there was life and death. The first flame erupted from the depths of the earth, a blazing manifestation of change itself. Its very existence shattered the equilibrium that had defined reality since before memory. And from its depths, from the power it radiated, for Lord souls emerged, for fragments of unimaginable power that represented fundamental aspects of this new reality. These weren't merely powerful essences. They were the building blocks of the new world order, primordial forces given form. From the first flame's depths, for Lord souls emerged fragments of unimaginable power that represented fundamental aspects of this new reality. The first soul, a brilliant soul of light and power beyond measure, was claimed by a being who would come to be known as Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. This wasn't merely a title or honorific. Gwyn literally embodied sunlight itself. With this soul, Gwyn became a god in the truest sense, commanding legions of knights clad in silver armor, wielding lightning as his primary weapon, and establishing himself as the supreme authority of the new age. His very presence brought illumination to the world, pushing back the gray and establishing dominion over the light. His bolts of lightning could pierce dragon scales, something that had never been accomplished before the first flame's appearance. Gwyn's kingdom would become Aner Londo, a city of impossible beauty built high above the world, where the light never faded and his power seemed absolute. He had children who inherited fragments of his power. A firstborn son who was a god of war but whose name was later stricken from the annals of history for his alliance with the dragons. Guinevere, a goddess of fertility and bounty, and Gwyndolin, the dark sun, a deity of the moon and illusions who would play a crucial role in the events leading to your journey. Gwyndolin would later create an illusion of his departed sister Guinevere to maintain the facade of Aner Londo's glory long after the other gods had fled. Gwyn also had loyal knights, the 4 Knights of Gwyn, legendary warriors whose names would echo through the ages. Ornstein the Dragonslayer, who wielded a spear in the fashion of Gwyn's firstborn. Artorias the Abysswalker, who would make a covenant with the Abyss to fight the Darkwraiths. Hawkeye Goff, a giant archer whose arrows could pierce dragon wings from miles away, and Lord's Blade Kirin, a deadly assassin who wielded dual blades. The second soul, representing death itself in its purest form, was claimed by Gravelord Nito, the first of the dead. This title isn't metaphorical. Nito was literally the first being to die after the first flame brought death into existence. But rather than ending his existence, death transformed him into something else entirely. Where Gwyn brought light, Nito embodied the end of all things, the final silence that awaits every living creature. His power allowed him to command legions of the dead, raising skeletons and undead servants to do his bidding, and with it, he became the arbiter of mortality, the force that would eventually claim all living things when the Age of Fire inevitably faded. Nito's form reflected his nature, a massive amalgamation of bones and corpses, a walking graveyard that carried with it the miasma of death. His arrival on the battlefield could spread disease and decay, turning the immortal dragon's scales brittle and vulnerable. This was crucial to the war against the dragons, as their stone scales had been impervious to all attacks until Nito's power introduced the concept of decay. After the war, he retreated to the Tomb of Giants, the deepest and darkest pit in all of Lordran, where he slumbered surrounded by the bones of those who came before, the skeletal remnants of creatures from the Age of Ancients. The third soul went to the Witch of Izalith, whose name has been lost to time but whose power was undeniable. Her soul represented life and warmth, the flames of creation rather than destruction. With it, she and her daughters practiced powerful flame sorceries, weaving fire into magic that could shape reality itself. Her pyromancy was art and science combined, the manipulation of flame at a fundamental level that went far beyond simple destruction. The witch created life through her flames, bringing into existence the demons of Izalith who would serve her kingdom. Her kingdom of Izalith was a place of warmth and light, where flames danced in every corridor and her daughters studied the mysteries of fire. The witch had many daughters, including Quelag and Kaelana, who would survive her transformation, and others who would not be so fortunate. Her attempts to recreate the power of the first flame would later result in catastrophic failure when the flame began to fade. In her desperation to keep the fire burning, she attempted to create a new flame using her own soul and the power of pyromancy. The spell went horribly wrong, transforming her into the bed of chaos and giving birth to the race of demons that would plague the world for ages to come. But in those early days, before her ambition exceeded her wisdom, she stood as one of the most powerful beings to ever exist. And then there was the fourth soul, the Dark Soul. Unlike the others, this soul was not large or immediately impressive. It didn't grant dominion over obvious forces like light or death or fire. It was small, easily overlooked, perhaps even dismissed as insignificant by those who claimed the greater souls. It was found not by a god or a great lord, but by a small, forgotten being known only as the Furtive Pygmy. The word furtive itself tells us something about how this being was perceived by those who came after. Secretive, guilty, trying to avoid attention. This wasn't a grand lord like Gwyn stepping forward to claim his destiny with trumpet blasts and declarations of power. This was someone small and hunched, someone easily forgotten, someone who found a soul that the others had overlooked or dismissed as unworthy of their attention. Where the others took their souls and immediately began waging war against the dragons, hungry for power and dominion, eager to reshape the world in their image, the pygmy did something radically different, something that would shape the entire future of the world in ways far more profound than any of them could have imagined. He took his dark soul and fragmented it, splitting it into countless pieces and distributing these fragments among the other hollow creatures who had not claimed Lord souls of their own. These hollow beings, these empty shells that had existed in the gray world without purpose or identity, without even the concept of self-awareness, received these fragments and were transformed. The fragments became known as humanity, and the beings who received them became the human race. This act of the pygmies was either incredibly generous or incredibly foolish, depending on one's perspective. He took a Lord soul, something that could have granted him personal power equal to Gwyn or Nito or the Witch, and divided it among countless others. He abandoned the possibility of personal divinity for the sake of creating an entire race. Every human, every single one born across countless generations, carries within them a shard of the Dark Soul. This is what makes them human rather than hollow. This is what gives them their resilience, their capacity for hope and determination even in the face of overwhelming despair. This is what makes them fundamentally different from the gods, who draw their power from light and fire. But here's what makes the Dark Soul unique among the four Lord Souls, what makes it fundamentally different from the power claimed by Gwyn or Nito or the Witch. It doesn't diminish when divided. When Gwyn shared fragments of his soul with his children and his knights, those fragments were measurably weaker than the whole. Each division reduced the power available to any individual bearer. The firstborn received a portion of Gwyn's sunlight, but it was only a portion. Gwyndolin received power over illusions and moonlight, but it was a shadow of Gwyn's full strength. Seth the Scaleless received a fragment as reward for his betrayal, but it was nowhere near the magnitude of the original Lord Soul. But the Dark Soul, fragmented across millions of humans born over countless generations, somehow maintains its strength in each fragment. a human born thousands of years after the Pygmy, at the time when the Undead Curse has already ravaged the world for centuries, still carries a piece of darkness just as potent as that carried by the first humans who walked in the Age of Fire. This property makes humanity fundamentally different from the gods and their descendants. Where divine power dilutes with each generation, each division, becoming weaker and weaker until it's barely recognizable as the original force, human power remains constant across all divisions. This means that humanity as a collective has the potential to grow infinitely powerful as their numbers increase, while the gods inevitably weaken over time as their power spreads thinner and thinner across their descendants. This difference would become the source of tremendous conflict in the ages to come. Gwyn would come to fear it, to see in humanity's strange resilience and ever-growing numbers a threat to everything he had built. The gods would attempt to suppress it, to control it, to prevent it from ever reaching its full potential. And ultimately, the entire structure of the Age of Fire, with all its glory and all its tyranny, with all its beauty and all its cruelty, would be built in part to contain and control this potential that the Furtive Pygmy had unwittingly created when he chose to share his dark soul rather than hoard it for himself. With their newfound power, Gwyn, Nito, and the Witch of Izalith, along with an unlikely ally, declared war on the everlasting dragons. This ally was Seth the Scaleless, a dragon born without the stone scales that made his kin immortal and invulnerable. Seth had spent his entire existence studying his brethren, jealous of their immortality, desperate to understand the source of their power and find a way to claim it for himself. When the lords rose up against the dragons, Seth saw an opportunity for revenge against those who had mocked him for his deformity. He betrayed his own kind, revealing to Gwyn the secret weakness that made dragon scales vulnerable. Lightning could pierce them where nothing else could. The war that followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation, a battle that would literally reshape the landscape of the world and determine who would rule in the new Age of Fire. The dragons fought with primal fury, their breath attacks turning entire battlefields to ash, their massive forms capable of crushing dozens of warriors with a single movement. They had ruled unchallenged for eons, and they would not surrender their dominion without extracting a terrible price. But the lords had advantages the dragons could not match: intelligence, strategy, coordination, and most importantly, the power of the lord's souls. Gwyn's lightning bolts rained down from the sky, each one capable of piercing dragon scales and burning through dragon flesh. Where the dragons had been untouchable in the Age of Ancients, Gwyn's power made them vulnerable for the first time in their existence. His Silver Knights fought with coordinated precision, striking at weak points revealed by their lord's lightning strikes, working together in formations that the solitary dragons could not counter. But the cost was enormous. For every dragon that fell, 70 of Gwyn's knights perished. 60 warriors died for every dragon slain. The mountains of corpses from this war became the foundation for the new world that would emerge from its ashes. Nito brought death to beings that had never known mortality, that had existed since before the concept of death itself came into being. His miasma of disease and decay corrupted dragon bodies from within, making their scales brittle, turning their immortal flesh to rot and dust. The dragons had no defense against this because they had never needed one. Death was a new concept brought into being by the first flame, and they had no immunity to something that had never existed before their war with the lords. They didn't understand what was happening to them as their bodies decayed, as their strength faded, as they felt weakness for the first time in their eternal existence. Nito's army of the dead fought without fear or hesitation, rising again even when struck down, wearing down the dragons through attrition in a way no mortal army ever could. The Witch of Izalith unleashed flames that could consume dragon flesh, creating firestorms that turned entire valleys into smoking wastelands. Her flames were different from the simple fires the dragons themselves could breathe. These were flames of creation and destruction combined, magical fires that didn't just burn but transformed, that didn't just destroy but reshaped. Her daughters joined her in battle, weaving intricate spell patterns that trapped dragons in walls of flame, that turned the very air into scalding death. The war raged across the gray world, transforming it with fire and lightning and death. The stone arch trees burned. The gray crags cracked and crumbled. The eternal stasis of the Age of Ancients was shattered forever. And when the last great dragon fell, when the Age of Ancients ended and the Age of Fire began, the world was fundamentally changed. The dragons were defeated, their civilization reduced to ruins, their kind scattered and broken. Some fled to distant corners of the world, like the ancient dragon found later in Ash Lake. Others, like Seth, sided with the victors and were rewarded for their betrayal. Seth received a fragment of Gwyn's Lord Soul, was granted the title of Duke, and retreated to the Duke's archives where he would spend ages trying to discover the secret of immortality that his scales had denied him. The Undead Curse and Gwyn's fear with the dragons defeated, the Age of Fire began in earnest. Gwyn ruled from Anerlondo, his power seemingly absolute, his kingdom a beacon of light in a world that had known only gray for countless ages. The gods prospered, their children multiplied, and for a time it seemed as though the Age of Fire would last forever. But this age, like all ages, was never meant to last eternally. The first flame, which had given birth to disparity and the Lord Souls, which had brought light and dark and life and death into existence, began to fade. And as it faded, as its power diminished year by year, century by century, Gwyn realized something terrifying. The Age of Dark was coming, and humanity, with their fragments of the Dark Soul, would naturally inherit it. The flame that had brought the gods their power was dying, and when it died, the darkness would return. But this wouldn't be the gray stasis of the Age of Ancients. This would be an age ruled by the Dark Soul, by humanity, by the very beings Gwyn had allowed to exist in his kingdom but never truly trusted. According to Darkstalker Kaathe and evidence found in later ages, particularly in the Ringed City where the truth was preserved, Gwyn placed a seal upon the Dark Soul itself, a ring of fire that would contain its power and prevent it from ever reaching its full potential. This seal became known as the Darksign, and it would transform humanity from beings with natural resilience and potential immortality into creatures dependent upon the fire for their very existence. It was brilliant in its cruelty, suppressing humanity's natural power while binding their fate to the very flame that sustained the gods. But the seal could only hold as long as the first flame burned bright and strong. When the flame began to fade, when its power weakened with the passing of ages, the Darksign's ability to contain the darkness weakened as well. And when that happened, something terrible began manifesting across the human population. The Undead Curse. The curse operates through a cruel logic that turns humanity's greatest strength, their resilience, their refusal to give up, into a torment. When a human dies, they should remain dead like any other creature. But the Darksign prevents true death, causing the curse to resurrect at bonfires scattered throughout Lordran and beyond. Each death, each resurrection, slowly erodes the victim's humanity. They lose memories first, forgetting loved ones and cherished moments. Then they lose emotions, becoming numb to joy and sorrow alike. Their connections to other people fray and break. Their sense of self deteriorates with each cycle of death and rebirth. Eventually, if they die enough times or lose all sense of purpose, all reason to continue existing, they go hollow, becoming mindless creatures that attack anything living, shambling through ruins without thought or consciousness, mere shadows of the humans they once were. The progression is horrifying to witness. You see it in the hollows you encounter throughout your journey. Some still wear the armor they died in, still carry the weapons they once wielded with skill. Some wander in patterns that suggest they're trying to perform tasks they remember from life. A hollow soldier endlessly pacing a patrol route, a hollow merchant standing behind a counter with nothing to sell, a hollow mother cradling an empty bundle as if it were still her child. They're not just dead. They're worse than dead. They're the living remnants of people who once had hopes and dreams and loved ones, reduced to automatons acting out the last fragments of purpose they can remember. The bonfires themselves represent a brilliant and terrible piece of this control system. They're linked to the first flame, extensions of its power scattered throughout Lordran. They're fueled by humanity, requiring you to sacrifice those precious fragments of the dark soul to strengthen them, to increase the number of times they can heal you. When an undead dies, their accumulated souls and any liquid humanity they were carrying flow into the bonfire network automatically. No choice or action required. Based on the mechanics of the world, they appear to be absorbed by the bonfires, feeding the flames that connect back to the first flame itself. Think about what this system creates. The undead are motivated to hunt for souls and humanity, gathering these resources through combat and exploration, defeating enemies and claiming their power. They grow stronger through this accumulation, feeling progress and achievement. But then they die, and in Dark Souls, death is inevitable, and all that accumulated power flows into the bonfires. The bonfire network benefits from their deaths. The system that cursed them grows stronger from their failures. It's a cycle of accumulation and loss, of gathering power only to feed it back into the system that oppresses you. Whether this was Gwyn's intention from the beginning, whether he deliberately designed the curse to create this soul-harvesting mechanism, or whether it's simply how the curse functions as a consequence of its nature and connection to the first flame, remains a matter of interpretation among those who study these dark times. What is certain is that the system exists, and whatever its origins, it serves the interests of those who want to maintain the Age of Fire. The curse keeps humans weak and confused, prevents them from realizing their true potential as bearers of the Dark Soul, and simultaneously harvests their power to feed the very flame that sustains the god's reign. By the time our protagonist awakens in the Northern Undead Asylum, the curse has been running its course for centuries, perhaps even millennia. Thousands upon thousands of undead have been created over the years, each one bearing the Darksign somewhere on their body, each one slowly losing their humanity with every death and resurrection. Most have already fallen to hollowing. The hollows that populate Lordran's ruins and dungeons vastly outnumber the sane undead you encounter. For every Solaire or Siegmeyer or Laurentius who clings to their purpose, there are hundreds of mindless hollows shambling through the darkness, their names forgotten, their stories lost, their humanity consumed by the curse. A few hold on, clinging to purpose or duty or simple stubborn determination. Some, like Solaire of Astora, maintain their sanity through an unshakable goal, a quest that gives their cursed existence meaning. In his case, the search for his own sun, his own source of light in the darkness. Others, like the merchants and blacksmiths you encounter, have found relatively safe locations where they can practice their trade and interact with other undead, giving them social connection and purpose without constantly risking death in combat. And somewhere among these cursed beings, locked in a cell they don't remember entering in an asylum they don't remember reaching, is the one who would come to be known as the Chosen Undead. The Northern Undead Asylum and Oscar's role. The Northern Undead Asylum itself tells a story about abandonment and decay. This prison is enormous, a massive complex built into the mountainside with multiple levels and dozens of cells. The deterioration visible in every corridor speaks to centuries of neglect. How many undead were imprisoned here over the years? The number of empty cells suggests thousands, all locked away from society, left to slowly go hollow in isolation. The asylum demon's presence reveals something crucial about how this place is viewed by the outside world. This lesser demon somehow made its way from lost Izalith to this remote prison. When this creature took up residence, the response from whatever authority built this place was apparently to do nothing. Let the demon stay. Let it guard the exit. Let it ensure that none of the prisoners ever escape. Your cell is utterly unremarkable. Stone walls, iron bars, minimal furnishing. There's nothing that would tell you who you were before the curse. No personal belongings. No indication of how long you've been here or who put you here. This absence of information is crucial to understanding the Chosen Undead's origin. You are quite literally a blank slate. Whatever life you had before the curse has been completely erased. Then something changes. A corpse crashes through the hole in your ceiling, carrying with it a key to your cell. This corpse was dropped by Oscar of Astora, a knight who had come to the Asylum searching for someone to fulfill a prophecy. Oscar himself lies dying nearby, having been defeated by the Asylum demon in his attempt to escape. He gives you an Estus flask and recites a prophecy he learned from his family, that an undead would escape the Asylum, make a pilgrimage to Lordran, ring the bells of awakening, and succeed Lord Gwyn. When you pick up that key and unlock your cell door, you're not drawing on some hidden reserve of heroic destiny. You're simply doing what any rational being would do when given the opportunity to escape imprisonment. You're choosing freedom over captivity, action over resignation, hope over despair. And in the world of Dark Souls, where so many undead have given up and gone hollow, that simple choice to keep trying is what sets you apart. Your escape requires defeating the Asylum demon or fleeing and returning later with better gear. Most players flee that first time, and this itself is instructive. You're not expected to win every fight immediately. Sometimes survival requires recognizing when you're outmatched. When you finally defeat the demon and use Oscar's key to unlock the exit, you're completing the first stage of a journey that Oscar began but could not finish. A giant crow carries you from the Asylum to Lordran, depositing you at Firelink Shrine. This crow is itself mysterious. It helps you without explanation, removing the logistical challenges and placing you directly where you need to be. Another facilitator, like Oscar, another piece of the machinery that sets the Chosen Undead on their path. The prophecy and the Serpent's Firelink Shrine becomes your hub, the place you'll return to repeatedly throughout your journey. But when you first arrive, carried by the giant crow from the Asylum, the inhabitants don't treat you as someone special. The crestfallen warrior sits by the bonfire, having given up on his own quest, too hollow in spirit, if not yet in body, to find purpose. He calls you another undead who'll end up like all the others, his voice dripping with the cynicism of someone who's seen too many hopeful undead arrive at Firelink only to give up and go hollow within days or weeks. Petrus of Thorolund and his group arrive representing the Way of White, the religious order dedicated to worshipping the gods and maintaining the Age of Fire. They're searching for someone, though they won't say who or why. Petrus is polite but dismissive, more concerned with his own mission than with helping you. Even Anastasia of Astora, the firekeeper locked in a cell beneath the shrine, mute and unable to communicate, simply performs her function as keeper of the bonfire without acknowledging you as anything more than another undead using her services. None of them recognize you as the prophesied Chosen Undead because at this point you're not. You're just another cursed human trying to survive, no different from the countless others who've come before. The title, the destiny, the sense of being chosen, all of that comes later, and when it does come, the timing reveals something important about the nature of prophecy itself. It's only later, after you've rung both bells of awakening, the one above in the undead parish and the one below in Quellag's domain, after you've proven yourself capable of achieving what most undead never accomplish, that Kingseeker Frampt appears at Firelink Shrine and starts calling you the Chosen Undead. The timing is telling, almost suspicious when you think about it carefully. Frampt doesn't appear before you ring the bells. He doesn't seek you out in the Asylum or guide you from the beginning of your journey. He doesn't appear to help you through the challenges that test whether you're truly capable. He waits until you've already proven capable of significant achievement, waits until you've demonstrated that you have what it takes to overcome deadly challenges, and then he appears and claims you were chosen all along, that this was always your destiny. Frampt presents himself as a close friend of the great Lord Gwyn, explaining in grandiose terms that your destiny is to succeed Gwyn as Lord of Cinder, to link the first flame and preserve the Age of Fire for another age. He makes it sound glorious, important, like you're being offered the chance to save the world from darkness. To accomplish this grand destiny, he explains, you must obtain the Lord Vessel from Princess Guinevere in Aner Londo, fill it with the souls of the great lords, Gravelord Nito in the Tomb of Giants, the Witch of Izalith who became the Bed of Chaos, Seth the Scaleless in the Duke's Archives, and the four kings in the ruins of New Londo, and then use this vessel to access the Kiln of the First Flame where Gwyn waits, where the fire itself waits to be linked. Frampt tells you this is your purpose, your reason for existing as an undead. He says the curse can be lifted, that linking the flame will end the cycle of death and resurrection. He makes promises about redemption and salvation, about bringing light back to a darkening world. But he conveniently forgets to mention certain crucial details. He doesn't tell you that linking the flame means walking into the fire itself, letting it consume your body and soul. He doesn't mention that you'll burn for ages, possibly centuries. As fuel for the first flame, your consciousness slowly eroding in the flames until another undead comes to take your place. He doesn't explain that succeeding Gwyn doesn't mean inheriting his throne or his power. It means taking his place as kindling, as sacrifice, as fuel. But there's another serpent with a different story, another voice offering another interpretation of destiny and prophecy. If you defeat the four kings before placing the Lord Vessel with Frampt, if you venture into the abyss that consumed New Londo and emerge victorious, Darkstalker Kaathe appears in that darkness and offers you an entirely different narrative about your purpose and the world's fate. Kaathe tells you that the prophecy Frampt recites is a lie, a fabrication created to manipulate undead into serving the god's interests. He claims that Gwyn feared humanity, feared the Dark Soul and the power it represented, feared the Dark Lord who would inevitably be born among humans when the Age of Fire ended. According to Kaathe, Gwyn's linking of the flame was an act against the natural order, an attempt to prevent the Age of Dark that should follow the Age of Fire just as surely as night follows day. The flame was meant to fade, Kaathe argues. The Age of Fire was meant to end, and humanity, with their fragments of the Dark Soul, was meant to inherit the world in the age that followed. Kaathe claims you should become the Dark Lord, should let the flame fade and die, should usher in the Age of Dark, the true age of humanity, free from the tyranny of the gods and their manipulations. He makes it sound like liberation, like justice, like humanity finally claiming what was always rightfully theirs. He speaks of ending the curse, of humanity achieving its true potential, of a world where the Dark Soul can finally express its full power without suppression or control. But which serpent tells the truth? Which one is genuinely trying to help you versus manipulating you for their own ends? The troubling answer, the one that becomes clearer the more you examine their words and their histories, might be that both are lying, or at least hiding crucial parts of the story to serve their own agendas. Frampt wants you to link the fire, but he conveniently forgets to mention the full cost of that choice. He doesn't explain that you'll burn as fuel until you're nothing but ash and fading consciousness. He doesn't mention that this has happened before, that there have been other chosen undead who came before you, other heroes who linked the flame only to be forgotten as the cycle continued. He presents linking the flame as a glorious destiny when it's really just another sacrifice to maintain the god's power and postpone the inevitable. But Kaathe's motivations are no clearer, and his history suggests he's not the champion of humanity he claims to be. While he talks eloquently about freedom and humanity's right to inherit the world, his actions tell a different story. Kaathe taught the four kings of New Londo the art of life drain, a technique that allowed them to steal humanity and souls from other humans. This wasn't a gift to help humanity achieve greatness. This was the corrupting power that led to the Four Kings' fall, that transformed them from noble rulers into servants of the Abyss, that ultimately led to the flooding of New Londo when the Abyss they were generating threatened to consume everything. Think about what that means. Kaathe directly caused the destruction of an entire city, the deaths of countless humans, all in pursuit of his goals. He corrupted humanity's rulers and then abandoned them when his experiments spiraled out of control. This is not the behavior of someone genuinely concerned with humanity's well-being. And there's more. Dialogue from characters like Marvelous Chester, who appears in the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, and from Hawkeye Goff, one of Gwyn's four knights, suggests that a primordial serpent manipulated the people of Asylum into disturbing Manus's grave. While they don't explicitly name which serpent was responsible, the connection to darkness and the manipulation of humans toward destructive ends points strongly toward Kaathe as the culprit. If this interpretation is correct, then Kaathe orchestrated the destruction of Asylum just as surely as he orchestrated the fall of New Londo. Asylum was once a peaceful land known for its unique sorceries that drew power from nature rather than souls. The people lived in harmony with the forest, developing magic that enhanced their connection to the natural world. But they were somehow convinced to dig up and disturb the grave of a primordial human, a being who had been dead and buried for so long that his name, Manus, was nearly forgotten. This being possessed an enormous quantity of humanity, possibly being one of the original recipients of dark soul fragments from the Furtive Pygmy himself, possibly even being the Pygmy. When Manus was disturbed and awakened, when his torment drove him to madness, his humanity ran completely wild, creating the Abyss and consuming Asylum in uncontrollable darkness. The entire kingdom was destroyed, its people transformed into twisted monsters, its princess kidnapped and held captive, its peaceful existence erased. And all of this happened because someone convinced them that disturbing this ancient grave was a good idea, that whatever they sought was worth the risk. Both serpents, when you examine their patterns, are reactive rather than proactive. They respond to your achievements rather than actively guiding you from the beginning. Neither one appears at the Asylum to help you escape. Neither one guides you through the early challenges or protects you from the dangers you face. They only reveal themselves after you've already proven capable of significant accomplishments, after you've demonstrated you have the strength to possibly reach the Kiln and make the final choice. This suggests they're less interested in who you were before the curse and more interested in what you can accomplish now, in whether you can serve as a useful tool for their purposes. Which serpent tells the truth? The answer is complex and troubling. The prophecy that Oscar recites, that Frampt reinforces, might be legitimate, passed down through generations of Astora knights as genuine foreknowledge of events to come. Or it might be a complete fabrication, created by Gwendolyn or Frampt or some other force seeking to ensure that capable undead continue to journey to the Kiln and link the flame, perpetuating the Age of Fire indefinitely. The game never confirms which interpretation is correct, never provides definitive evidence one way or the other. What we do know is that the system works. The prophecy motivates people like Oscar to seek out capable undead and set them on the path to Lordran. It gives desperate, cursed individuals a sense of purpose, a reason to keep fighting when everything seems hopeless. It creates a steady stream of potential chosen undead who journey to the Kiln, and eventually, one of them succeeds in linking the flame. Whether that success validates the prophecy or simply demonstrates that enough attempts will eventually produce the desired result remains ambiguous. Both serpents present themselves as knowledgeable guides, but both have clear biases and hidden agendas. Frampt serves the gods and wants to maintain their age of dominance. Kaathe claims to serve humanity, but his methods have repeatedly led to human suffering and destruction. The truth about your destiny, about your purpose, about what you should do when you reach the Kiln, neither serpent can be fully trusted to provide it. The journey and what it reveals. Your journey through Lordran is itself profoundly instructive about the nature of your origin and what the Chosen Undead truly represents. You start weak, barely capable of defeating the hollow soldiers that guard the Undead Burg. Your starting equipment is basic at best, whatever armor and weapons Oscar left for you or that you scavenged from the Asylum. Your skills are limited to simple attacks and dodges. You die frequently to enemies that will later seem trivial. You get lost in areas that will eventually become familiar. You make mistakes that cost you hundreds or thousands of souls. But you learn. With each death, with each resurrection, you gain knowledge. You learn enemy patterns, memorize attack timings, discover shortcuts and secrets. You upgrade your equipment at blacksmiths, level up your stats at bonfires, experiment with different weapons and builds until you find what works for you. And slowly, gradually, through patient accumulation of experience and resources, you transform from a weak prisoner barely surviving against hollow soldiers into a warrior capable of standing against gods and primordial forces. This transformation isn't a result of unlocking some hidden prophesied power that was always inside you, waiting to emerge. It's not destiny suddenly activating or divine intervention granting you strength. It's the gradual accumulation of souls spent on leveling up, the slow improvement of equipment through Titanite and Embers, the patient learning of mechanics and strategies, the hard-won knowledge purchased with countless deaths and resurrections. You become powerful the same way anyone becomes skilled at anything, through practice, persistence, and refusal to give up when faced with failure. The resurrection mechanic is absolutely central to understanding what the Chosen Undead represents within the mythology of Dark Souls. Every time you die, which happens frequently, dozens, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of times in a typical playthrough, you face a choice. The game doesn't force you to continue. You could stop playing, could give up, could let your character remain dead at that bonfire forever. The choice to respawn, to retrieve your souls, to face that same challenge again with the knowledge you gained from failure, that's a choice you make actively every single time. This is why the Undead Curse, as horrible and cruel as it is in every other respect, also creates the unique potential for someone like the Chosen Undead to exist. In a world where death is final, where failure means permanent ending, the gods would always win. They have had centuries or millennia to perfect their power, to master their abilities, to establish their dominion. A mortal human, even a skilled one, couldn't hope to challenge beings like Ornstein and Smuff or Artorias or Gwyn himself in a fair fight where death is permanent. But the curse changes that fundamental equation. The curse gives humans something unprecedented. The ability to try again, to learn from mistakes, to eventually overcome any obstacle through sheer persistence and accumulated knowledge. An enemy who never truly dies, who can always come back for another attempt, who gets slightly better with each resurrection, is ultimately unbeatable given enough time and determination. This is what Gwyn feared when he looked at humanity and saw the potential inheritors of the Age of Dark. Not their strength in any individual moment, but their collective persistence, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when beaten down again and again. Think about how many times you die fighting a challenging boss like Ornstein and Smuff. The first attempt, you might barely survive 30 seconds, overwhelmed by their coordinated attacks. The second attempt, you last a bit longer, learning to dodge Ornstein's lightning thrust or avoid Smuff's hammer slam. The third attempt, you manage to kill one of them before dying. And eventually, after many attempts, after learning all their patterns and tells, after upgrading your equipment and adjusting your strategy, you emerge victorious. Not because you were chosen by destiny, but because you refused to accept defeat. The hollows you encounter throughout Lordran represent the alternative path, the fate that awaits those who give up before achieving their goals. Each hollow was once like you, once had their own quest or purpose that kept them sane and gave their cursed existence meaning. Each one had hopes, had goals, had reasons to keep fighting. The hollow soldiers in the Undead Burg were once guards protecting their city. The hollow warriors in Darkroot Garden were once proud fighters defending their forest. The hollow giants in Anerlando were once blacksmiths serving the gods. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe they died one too many times and lost their accumulated souls. Maybe they completed their quest only to find it didn't cure them or give them the peace they sought. Maybe they simply grew tired of the endless cycle of death and resurrection. Maybe they lost sight of why they were fighting in the first place. Whatever the specific cause, they gave up. They stopped trying. They let the hollowing process complete its work, and now they shamble through ruins without thought or purpose, attacking anything that moves with the mechanical violence of creatures operating on pure instinct. You don't know their names. You don't know their stories. You don't know what they were searching for or what they lost. You just know they failed where you're still succeeding, that they gave up where you're still fighting, that they let the curse claim them while you continue to resist. Every hollow you encounter is a reminder of what awaits you if you ever stop trying, if you ever accept defeat as permanent, if you ever let despair extinguish the spark that keeps you sane. The Artorias of the Abyss connection in the DLC content. Artorias of the Abyss, you're pulled back in time to Asylum during its destruction, during those terrible days when Manus' awakened fury consumed an entire kingdom. Here you encounter legendary figures from history, beings whose exploits have become myth by the time of your journey through Lordran. And here you discover something profound about yourself and your capabilities. You encounter the legendary Artorias, one of Gwyn's 4 knights, the Abyss Walker himself, the warrior who was supposed to stop Manus and save Asylum from the spreading darkness. But you don't find him victorious and triumphant. You find him already corrupted by the Abyss, his mind shattered by the very darkness he came to fight, his body twisted and consumed by forces he couldn't overcome. The knight who was supposed to be Asylum's savior has become another victim of the catastrophe. The story of Artorias' final battle is told through environmental details and item descriptions. He ventured into the Abyss to confront Manus directly, believing his covenant with the Abyss and his incredible skill would be enough to overcome any darkness. But the Abyss was too powerful, too concentrated, too primal. Manus' fury was beyond anything Artorias had encountered before. The Knight's shield, his great shield of Artorias, a legendary piece of equipment said to be completely impervious to dark magic, was broken in the battle. Rather than retreat, rather than admit defeat, Artorias discarded his shattered shield and used the last of his strength to save his wolf companion Sif, creating a protective barrier around the young wolf before being completely consumed by the Abyss. You, the Chosen Undead from the future, are the one who actually stops Manus. You venture into the deepest part of the Abyss, into the chasm where Manus dwells, and you confront the father of the Abyss himself in single combat. And you win. You succeed where Artorias, the legendary Abyss Walker, one of the greatest knights to ever live, utterly failed. Your ability to defeat Manus, to survive the Abyss, to accomplish what Artorias could not, doesn't make you chosen by prophecy or blessed by fate. It makes you exceptionally powerful through your accumulated strength and determined through your refusal to give up. Think about what this means. Artorias was a trained knight from birth, tutored by the gods themselves, wielding equipment forged in divine forges, empowered by a fragment of Gwyn's Lord Soul. He had every advantage of birth, training, and divine blessing. You're a cursed human who woke up in a cell with no memory of your past. No special training, no divine heritage, nothing but the basic equipment Oscar left behind and your own stubborn refusal to stay dead. Yet you achieve what he could not. You succeed where he failed. Not because prophecy ordained it, but because you kept trying when he couldn't, because the curse that seems like humanity's greatest weakness is also your greatest strength. The ability to die and learn and try again until you eventually overcome any obstacle. But the DLC also raises profound questions about Kaathe's vision of the Age of Dark and what it would actually mean for humanity. You see what happened to Asylum when concentrated darkness ran wild. The Abyss didn't bring freedom or enlightenment or humanity's true potential being realized. It brought madness, transformation into monsters, the complete destruction of civilization and culture. Every person in Asylum was either killed, transformed into a twisted creature, or driven insane. The peaceful kingdom known for its connection to nature and its gentle sorceries was completely erased, turned into a nightmare realm of darkness and despair. Kaathe speaks eloquently about freeing humanity from the gods' control, about the Age of Dark being humanity's rightful inheritance. But his track record suggests the Age of Dark might not be the paradise he promises. The Abyss consumed Asylum completely. The Darkwraiths he created in New Londo preyed upon other humans, stealing their humanity through life drain. Even Manus himself, who may have been one of the original humans to receive a fragment of the dark soul from the Furtive Pygmy, became a ravening beast when his humanity ran wild and uncontrolled, driven to madness and capable of nothing but rage and violence. This raises the troubling possibility that the darkness, when concentrated and unrestrained, is just as dangerous as Gwyn's attempts to suppress it. That perhaps the natural state humanity should seek isn't the eternal fire of the gods or the complete darkness Kaathe promises, but some balance between the two, some middle ground that the world has never achieved because both sides keep pushing toward their extremes. The final choice and what it means eventually, after countless deaths and resurrections, after defeating the great lords and claiming their souls, after filling the Lord vessel and unlocking the path forward, your journey brings you to the Kiln of the First Flame. This place exists outside the normal geography of Lordran, a realm unto itself accessible only through the power of the Lord vessel. The path to the Kiln is a gauntlet of ash and embers, a long walk through the burned-out remnants of what might have been Gwyn's kingdom at its height, now reduced to gray dust and fading memories. You fight your way past the hollow remnants of Gwyn's Black Knights, the elite warriors who followed their lord into the flame when he first linked it ages ago. These knights were once the most powerful fighters in existence, clad in black armor that had been scorched and tempered by the flames they walked into. They wielded weapons forged in divine forges, enhanced by the power of the gods themselves. They were utterly loyal to Gwyn, following him even into sacrifice, even into the furnace of the First Flame itself. But look at what they've become. They're hollow now, their minds burned away by centuries of exposure to the flame's power, reduced to ash and madness and mechanical violence. They stand as sentinels guarding the approach to their lord, but they don't recognize friend from foe anymore. They attack anything that moves with the desperate ferocity of creatures operating on instinct alone, their loyalty corrupted into simple territorial aggression. These were the finest knights Gwyn commanded, and this is what awaited them after they followed him into the flame. This is the fate that awaits anyone who links the fire. Not glory, not immortality, not even being remembered, but slow erasure until nothing remains but hollow violence. And then you face Gwyn himself, Gwyn the Lord of Sunlight, the being who conquered the everlasting dragons and ushered in the Age of Fire, the god who ruled from Aner Londo with power that shook the heavens, the warrior whose lightning bolts could pierce immortal scales, the king whose very presence brought light to the world. But the Gwyn you face is a shadow of his former glory, a burned-out husk of what he once was. His power has been consumed by centuries of fueling the First Flame with his own soul. His mind has deteriorated to the point where he can barely recognize you as a threat. He doesn't speak, doesn't try to reason with you, doesn't acknowledge your presence except as something to be destroyed. He attacks with the desperate ferocity of an animal backed into a corner, fighting not with strategy or intelligence but with the muscle memory of ancient battles that his hollowing mind can still access. His lightning is gone, burned away along with most of his power. He fights with a flaming greatsword, the fire a pale echo of the brilliance he once commanded. His movements are aggressive but predictable, powerful but lacking the divine precision he must have once possessed. He can be parried, his attacks telegraphed and vulnerable to counterattack. This is what the gods have been reduced to, what awaits anyone who sacrifices themselves to link the flame. When you defeat him, when you strike down the Lord of Sunlight in his own realm, you're not conquering a god at the height of his power. You're putting down a hollow shell of what once was the mightiest being in existence, a burned-out remnant clinging to purpose long after purpose has any meaning. It's mercy as much as victory, ending his suffering even as you claim his soul and fulfill your quest. With Gwyn defeated, you face the choice that defines your entire journey and reveals the truth about what it means to be the chosen undead. Before you lies the first flame, weak and fading but still burning, still exerting its influence over the world. You can walk into those flames, letting them consume you, using your accumulated power and the Lord's souls you've gathered to fuel it for another age. This is what Frampt wanted, what the prophecy foretold, what the entire machinery of gods and serpents and manipulation has been guiding you toward. Link the fire and preserve the age of fire, postponing the age of dark for another cycle, buying the world more time before the darkness comes. Or you can turn and walk away. You can leave the kiln behind, leave the flame to its fate, let it fade and die and allow the age of dark to begin. This is what Kaathe wanted, what he claims is humanity's birthright, the natural progression that Gwyn tried to prevent. Become the Dark Lord and usher in the age of humanity, free from the gods' control, free from the curse that has tormented your kind for centuries. The game presents both options without judgment, without telling you which is right. Frampt can't force you to link the fire, can't override your will even after guiding you through this entire journey. Kaathe can't force you to walk away, can't compel you to become the Dark Lord even after revealing what he claims is the truth about Gwyn's fear and manipulation. The serpents, the gods, the prophecy, the entire weight of history and destiny and expectation. None of it can override your free will in this final moment. You choose, not fate, not prophecy, not divine mandate. You. The truth about origin, so we return to our original question. What is the mysterious origin of the Chosen Undead? The factual answer is disappointingly simple. The Chosen Undead is a human being, a descendant of the Furtive Pygmy like all humans, cursed with the Darksign like thousands of other undead, imprisoned in the northern Undead Asylum for reasons unknown. They were freed by Astora of Astora, who dropped a key into their cell while searching for someone to fulfill a prophecy. They happened to be capable enough to escape the asylum, determined enough to pursue the quest Oscar set before them, and persistent enough to overcome every obstacle between them and the kiln of the first flame. That's it. That's the entire factual origin. No divine parentage, no special birth, no chosen one marked from the beginning. Just a cursed human who refused to give up. But the thematic answer is far more interesting. The Chosen Undead represents humanity's fundamental nature as interpreted through Dark Souls mythology. Remember that humans in this world are inherently resilient through their fragments of the Dark Soul. The Undead Curse is what happens when that resilience is suppressed and controlled, when the natural strength of humanity is twisted into something that seems like a punishment but retains its essential characteristic: the refusal to stay dead. Every undead is a testament to humanity's stubbornness, their unwillingness to accept defeat even in the face of impossible odds. Most succumb to hollowing eventually, but only after countless resurrections, only after fighting again and again until their will finally breaks. The Chosen Undead is simply the one whose will never breaks, who keeps fighting through every death, every failure, every seemingly impossible challenge. This makes the ambiguity of your origin not a flaw but a crucial part of the message. You don't need a special backstory to be important. You don't need divine mandate to change the world. You don't need prophecy to give your actions meaning. What you need is determination, the willingness to keep trying when everyone else has given up, the refusal to accept that your fate is already written. The prophecy, whether created by Gwyn, by Gwendolyn, by the serpents, or by some other force, serves as a framework for understanding your journey, but it doesn't define that journey. You can fulfill it or reject it. You can follow Frampt's path or Kaathe's path. You can link the fire or walk away from it. The prophecy brought you to the moment of choice, but the choice itself is entirely yours. Without a backstory dictating who you should be, without a predetermined destiny forcing you down one path, you're free to become whatever you choose through your actions. The knight who started as a prisoner becomes a godslayer. The thief who knew only survival becomes a world changer. The commoner who was nobody becomes the chosen undead, not because they were born for it, but because they earned it. In the end, the mystery of the chosen undead's origin is less about where they came from and more about what they represent. They represent the idea that anyone, no matter how low they start, no matter how dire their circumstances, no matter how heavily the odds are stacked against them, can rise to achieve legendary status through nothing more than determination and refusal to surrender. They represent humanity's essential nature. Resilient, stubborn, capable of enduring unimaginable hardship and still continuing to fight. The chosen undead is chosen not by the gods or by fate, but by themselves. Every time they pick themselves up after death, every time they face another impossible boss, every time they venture into another deadly area, they're choosing to continue. They're choosing to be the hero, to be the legend, to be the one who changes everything. And in a world as dark and hopeless as Lordran, that choice, that determination, that refusal to give up is the most powerful force in existence. So when you wake up in that cell in the Northern Undead Asylum, when you pick up that key and step out into the darkness, when you face the Asylum demon and begin your journey, you're not following someone else's plan. You're writing your own story. You're creating your own legend. You're choosing to be the chosen undead. And that choice, more than any prophecy or divine mandate or predetermined destiny, is what makes you special. Not where you came from, but where you're going. Not who you were, but who you choose to become. That's the true origin of the chosen undead. The moment they decided to keep fighting no matter what. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Dark Souls lore, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more atmospheric explorations of gaming's greatest mysteries. What are your thoughts on the chosen undead's origin? Do you believe in the prophecy, or do you think it's all manipulation? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, don't you dare go hollow.